Chapter 16 of Sylvia's Lovers by Elizabeth Gaskell. This Librivox recording is in the public domain. Read by Terence Callan. Chapter 16. The Engagement. As the day lengthens, so the cold strengthens. It was so that year. The hard frost, which began on New Year's Eve, lasted on and on into late February, black and bitter, but welcome enough to the farmers, as it kept back the too early growth of autumn-sown wheat, and gave them the opportunity of leading manure. But it did not suit invalids as well, and Belle Robson, though not getting worse, did not make any progress towards amendment. Sylvia was kept very busy, notwithstanding that she had the assistance of a poor widow woman in the neighborhood on cleaning or washing or churning days. Her life was quiet and monotonous, although hard-working, and while her hands mechanically found and did their accustomed labor, the thoughts that rose in her head always centered on Charlie Kinraid, his ways, his words, his looks, whether they all meant what she would fain believe they did, and whether, meaning love at the time, such a feeling was likely to endure. Her mother's story of crazy Nancy had taken hold of her, but not as a caution, rather as a parallel case to her own. Like Nancy, and borrowing the poor girl's own words, she would say softly to herself, "He once was here." But all along she believed in her heart he would come back again to her, though it touched her strangely to imagine the agonies of forsaken love. Philip knew little of all this. He was very busy with facts and figures, doggedly fighting through the necessary business, and only now and then allowing himself the delicious relaxation of going to Haytersbank in an evening, to inquire after his aunt's health, and to see Sylvia. For the two Fosters were punctiliously anxious to make their shopmen test all their statements, insisting on an examination of the stock as if Hepburn and Coulson were strangers to the shop, having the Monkshaven auctioneer in to appraise the fixtures and necessary furniture, going over the shop books for the last 20 years with their successors, an employment which took up evening after evening, and not unfrequently taking one of the young men on the long commercial journeys which were tediously made in a gig. By degrees both Hepburn and Coulson were introduced to distant manufacturers and wholesale dealers. They would have been willing to take the Fosters' word for every statement the brothers had made on New Year's Day, but this, it was evident, would not have satisfied their masters, who were scrupulous in insisting that whatever advantage there was should always fall on the side of the younger men. When Philip saw Sylvia, she was always quiet and gentle, perhaps more silent than she had been a year ago, and she did not attend so briskly to what was passing around her. She was rather thinner and paler, but whatever change there was in her was always an improvement in Philip's eyes, so long as she spoke graciously to him. He thought she was suffering from long-continued anxiety about her mother, or that she had too much to do, and either cause was enough to make him treat her with a grave regard and deference which had a repressed tenderness in it, of which she, otherwise occupied, was quite unaware. She liked him better, too, than she had done a year or two before, because he did not show her any of the eager attention which teased her then, although its meaning was not fully understood. Things were much in this state when the frost broke, and milder weather succeeded. This was the time so long looked forward to by the invalid and her friends, as favoring the doctor's recommendation of change of air. Her husband was to take her to spend a fortnight with a kindly neighbor who lived near the farm they had occupied, 40 miles or so inland, before they came to Haytersbank. The widow woman was to come and stay in the house to keep Sylvia company during her mother's absence. Daniel indeed was to return home after conveying his wife to her destination, but there was so much to be done on the land at this time of the year that Sylvia would have been alone all day had it not been for the arrangement just mentioned. There was active stirring in Monkshaven harbor as well as on shore. The whalers were finishing their fittings out for the Greenland seas. It was a close season. That is to say, there would be difficulty in passing the barrier of ice which lay between the ships and the whaling grounds, and yet these must be reached before June, or the year's expedition would be of little avail. Every blacksmith's shop rung with the rhythmical clang of busy hammers, beating out old iron, such as horseshoes, nails, or stubs, into the great harpoons. The quays were thronged with busy and important sailors rushing hither and thither, conscious of the demand in which they were held at this season of the year. It was wartime, too. Many captains, unable to procure men in Monkshaven, would have to complete their crews in the Shetlands. The shops in the town were equally busy. Stores had to be purchased by the whaling masters, warm clothing of all sorts to be provided. These were the larger wholesale orders, but many a man, and woman too, brought out their small hoards to purchase extra comforts or precious keepsakes for some beloved one. It was the time of the great half-yearly traffic of the place. Another impetus was given to business when the whalers returned in the autumn, and the men were flush of money, and full of delight at once more seeing their homes and their friends. There was much to be done in Foster's shop, and later hours were kept than usual. Some perplexity or other was occupying John and Jeremiah Foster. Their minds were not so much on the alert as usual, being engaged on some weighty matter of which they had as yet spoken to no one. But it thus happened that they did not give the prompt assistance they were accustomed to render at such times, and Coulson had been away on some of the new expeditions devolving on him and Philip as future partners. One evening after the shop was closed, while they were examining the goods and comparing the sales with the entries in the day-book, Coulson suddenly inquired, "By the way, Hester, does thee know where the parcel of best bandanas is gone? There was 4 left, as I'm pretty sure, when I set off to Sandsend, and today Mark Alderson came in and would fain have had one, and I could find none nowhere." "I sold to last today to yon sailor, the specksioneer, who fought the press gang same time as poor Darley were killed. He took it, and 3 yards of yon pink ribbon with t' black and yellow crosses on it, as Philip could never abide. Philip has got 'em into book, if he'll only look." "Is he here again?" said Philip. "I didn't see him. What brings him here where he's known wanted?" "T' shop were throng with folk," said Hester, "and he knew his own mind about the handkerchief, and didn't tarry long. Just as he was leaving, his eye caught on t' ribbon, and he came back for it. It were when you were serving Mary Darby, and there was a vast of folk about you." "I wish I'd seen him," said Coulson. "I'd a gi'n him a word and a look he'd not have forgotten in a hurry." "Why, what's up?" said Philip, surprised at William's unusual manner, and at the same time rather gratified to find a reflection of his own feelings about Kinraid. Coulson's face was pale with anger, but for a moment or two he seemed uncertain whether he would reply or not. "Up," said he at length, "it's just this. He came after my sister for better nor 2 year, and a better lass, no nor a prettier in my eyes, niver broke bread. And then my master saw another girl that he liked better." William almost choked in his endeavor to keep down all appearance of violent anger, and then went on, "and that he played t' same game wi', as I've heerd tell." "And how did thy sister take it?" asked Philip eagerly. "She died in a 6-month," said William. "She forgived him, but it's beyond me. I thought it were him when I heard of to work about Darley, Kinraid, and coming from Newcastle, where Annie lived prentice, and I made inquiry, and it were to same man. But I'll say no more about him, for it stirs to old Adam more nor I like, or is fitting." Out of respect to him, Philip asked no more questions, although there were many things that he fain would have known. Both Coulson and he went silently and grimly through the remainder of their day's work. Independent of any personal interest which either or both of them had or might have in Kinraid's being a light o' love, this fault of his was one with which the two grave, sedate young men had no sympathy. Their hearts were true and constant, whatever else might be their failings, and it is no new thing to damn the faults we have no mind to. Philip wished that it was not so late, or that very evening he would have gone to keep guard over Sylvia in her mother's absence. Nay, perhaps he might have seen reason to give her a warning of some kind. But if he had done so, it would have been locking the stable door after the steed was stolen. Kinraid had turned his steps towards Haytersbank Farm as soon as ever he had completed his purchases. He had only come that afternoon to Monkshaven, and for the sole purpose of seeing Sylvia once more, before he went to fulfill his engagement as specksioneer in the Urania, a whaling vessel that was to sail from North Shields on Thursday morning, and this was Monday. Sylvia sat in the house-place, her back to the long, low window, in order to have all the light the afternoon hour afforded for her work. A basket of her father's unmended stockings was on the little round table beside her, and one was on her left hand, which she supposed herself to be mending, but from time to time she made long pauses, and looked in the fire, and yet there was but little motion of flame or light in it out of which to conjure visions. It was "redd up" for the afternoon, covered with a black mass of coal, over which the equally black kettle hung on the crook. In the back kitchen, Dolly Reed, Sylvia's assistant during her mother's absence, chanted a lugubrious ditty, befitting her condition as a widow, while she cleaned tins and cans and milking pails. Perhaps these bustling sounds prevented Sylvia from hearing approaching footsteps coming down the brow with swift advance. At any rate, she started and suddenly stood up as someone entered the open door. It was strange she should be so much startled, for the person who entered had been in her thoughts all during those long pauses. Charlie Kinraid and the story of Crazy Nancy had been the subjects for her dreams for many a day and many a night. Now he stood there, bright and handsome as ever, with just that much timidity in his face, that anxiety as to his welcome, which gave his accost an added charm, could she but have perceived it. But she was so afraid of herself, so unwilling to show what she felt, and how much she had been thinking of him in his absence, that her reception seemed cold and still. She did not come forward to meet him. She went crimson to the very roots of her hair, but that, in the waning light, he could not see, and she shook so that she felt as if she could hardly stand, but the tremor was not visible to him. She wondered if he remembered the kiss that had passed between them on New Year's Eve, the words that had been spoken in the dairy on New Year's Day, the tones, the looks that had accompanied those words. But all she said was, "I didn't think to see you. I thought you'd 'a' sailed." "I told you I should come back, didn't I?" said he, still standing, with his hat in his hand, waiting to be asked to sit down, and she, in her bashfulness, forgetting to give the invitation, but instead pretending to be attentively mending the stocking she held. Neither could keep quiet and silent long. She felt his eyes were upon her, watching every motion, and grew more and more confused in her expression and behavior. He was a little taken aback by the nature of his reception, and was not sure at first whether to take the great change in her manner from what it had been when last he saw her, as a favorable symptom or otherwise. By and by, luckily for him, in some turn of her arm to reach the scissors on the table, she caught the edge of her work-basket, and down it fell. She stooped to pick up the scattered stockings and ball of worsted, and so did he. And when they rose up, he had fast hold of her hand, and her face was turned away, half ready to cry. "What ails you at me?" said he beseechingly. "You might have forgotten me, and yet I thought we made a bargain against forgetting each other." No answer. He went on, "You've never been out of my thoughts, Sylvia Robson, and I'm come back to Monkshaven for naught but to see you once and again afore I go away to the northern seas. It's not 2 hours since I landed at Monkshaven, and I've been near neither kith nor kin as yet, and now I'm here you won't speak to me." "I don't know what to say," said she, in a low, almost inaudible tone. Then, hardening herself, and resolving to speak as if she did not understand his only half-expressed meaning, she lifted up her head, and all but looking at him, while she wrenched her hand out of his, she said, "Mother's gone to Middleham for a visit, and Feyther's out to Ploughfield wi' Kester, but he'll be in afore long." Charlie did not speak for a minute or so. Then he said, "You're not so dull as to think I'm come all this way for to see either your father or your mother. I've a great respect for 'em both, but I'd hardly a come all this way for to see 'em, and me bound to be back in Shields if I walk every step of the way by Wednesday night. It's that you won't understand my meaning, Sylvia. It's not that you don't, or that you can't." He made no effort to repossess himself of her hand. She was quite silent, but in spite of herself she drew long, hard breaths. "I may go back to where I came from," he went on. "I thought to go to sea wi' a blessed hope to cheer me up, and a knowledge o' someone as loved me as I'd left behind. Someone as loved me half as much as I did her, for the measure o' my love toward her is so great and mighty I'd be content with half as much from her, till I'd taught her to love me more. But if she's a cold heart and cannot care for a honest sailor, why, then I'd best go back at once." He made for the door. He must have been pretty sure from some sign or other, or he would never have left it to her womanly pride to give way, and for her to make the next advance. He had not taken 2 steps when she turned quickly towards him and said something, the echo of which, rather than the words themselves, reached him. "I didn't know you cared for me. You never said so." In an instant he was back at her side, his arm round her in spite of her short struggle, and his eager, passionate voice saying, "You never knowed I loved you, Sylvia? Say it again, and look in my face while you say it, if you can. Why, last winter I thought you'd be such a woman, when you'd come to be one as my eyen had never looked upon, and this year, ever sin' I saw you in the kitchen corner, sitting crouching behind my uncle, I as good as swore I'd have you for wife, or never wed at all. And it was not long ere you knowed it, for all you were so coy, and now you have the face. No, you have not the face. Come, my darling, what is it?" For she was crying, and on his turning her wet, blushing face towards him, the better to look at it, she suddenly hid it in his breast. He lulled and soothed her in his arms, as if she had been a weeping child and he her mother, and then they sat down on the settle together, and when she was more composed, they began to talk. He asked her about her mother, not sorry in his heart at Belle Robson's absence. He had intended, if necessary, to acknowledge his wishes and desires with regard to Sylvia to her parents, but for various reasons he was not sorry that circumstances had given him the chance of seeing her alone, and obtaining her promise to marry him without being obliged to tell either her father or her mother at present. "I spent my money pretty free," he said, "and I've ne'er a penny to the fore, and your parents may look for something better for you, my pretty. But when I come back from this voyage, I shall stand a chance of having a share in the Urania, and maybe I shall be mate as well as specksioneer, and I can get a matter of from 70 to 90 pound a voyage, let alone the half guineas for every whale I strike, and 6 shilling a gallon on the oil, and if I keep steady with Forbes and Company, they'll make me master in time, for I've had good schooling, and can work a ship as well as any man. And I leave you with your parents, or take a cottage for you nigh at hand, but I would like to have something to the fore, and that I shall have, please God, when we come back in the autumn. I shall go to sea happy now, thinking I've your word. You're not one to go back from it, I'm sure, else it's a long time to leave such a pretty girl as you, and ne'er a chance of a letter reaching you just to tell you once again how I love you, and to bid you not to forget your true love." "There'll be no need of that," murmured Sylvia. She was too dizzy with happiness to have attended much to his details of his worldly prospects, but at the sound of his tender words of love her eager heart was ready to listen. "I don't know," said he, wanting to draw her out into more confession of her feelings. "There's many a one ready to come after you, and your mother is not o'er captivated with me. And there's yon tall fellow of a cousin as looks black at me, for if I'm not mista'en, he's a notion of being sweet on you hisself." "Not he," said Sylvia, with some contempt in her tone. "He's so full of business and to shop, and of making money and getting wealth." "Aye, aye, but perhaps when he gets a rich man, he'll come and ask my Sylvia to be his wife, and what will she say then?" "He'll niver come asking such a foolish question," said she, a little impatiently. "He knows what answer he'd get if he did." Kinraid said, almost as if to himself, "Your mother favors him, though." But she, weary of a subject she cared nothing about, and eager to identify herself with all his interests, asked him about his plans almost at the same time that he said these last words, and they went on as lovers do, intermixing a great many tender expressions with a very little conversation relating to facts. Dolly Reed came in and went out softly, unheeded by them, but Sylvia's listening ears caught her father's voice as he and Kester returned homewards from their day's work in the plough-field, and she started away and fled upstairs in shy affright, leaving Charlie to explain his presence in the solitary kitchen to her father. He came in, not seeing that anyone was there at first, for they had never thought of lighting a candle. Kinraid stepped forward into the firelight, his purpose of concealing what he had said to Sylvia quite melted away by the cordial welcome her father gave him the instant that he recognized him. "Bless thee, lad, who'd a thought o' seeing thee? Why, if ever a thought on thee at all, it were halfway to Davis Straits. To be sure, to winter's been a dree season, and thou'rt, maybe, into reet on to mak a late start. Latest start as iver I made was 9th o' March, and we struck 13 whales that year." "I have something to say to you," said Charlie, in a hesitating voice, so different to his usual hearty way that Daniel gave him a keen look of attention before he began to speak. And perhaps the elder man was not unprepared for the communication that followed. At any rate, it was not unwelcome. He liked Kinraid, and had strong sympathy not merely with what he knew of the young sailor's character, but with the life he led and the business he followed. Robson listened to all he said with approving nods and winks, till Charlie had told him everything he had to say, and then he turned and struck his broad, horny palm into Kinraid's as if concluding a bargain, while he expressed in words his hearty consent to their engagement. He wound up with a chuckle as the thought struck him that this great piece of business of disposing of their only child had been concluded while his wife was away. "I'm none so sure as to Missis'll like it," said he, "though whatever she'll have to say agin it, mischief only knows. But she's noan keen on mattermony, though I have made her as good a man as there is in a' to writings. Anyhow, I'm master, and that she knows. But maybe, for to sake of peace and quietness, though she's niver a scolding tongue, that I will say for her, we'd best keep this matter to ourselves till thou comes into port again. To lass upstairs'll like naught better than to curl hersel round a secret, and purr over it just as to old cat does or her blind kitten. But thou'll be wanting to see to lass, I'll be bound. An old man like me isn't as good company as a pretty lass. Laughing a low, rich laugh over his own wit, Daniel went to the bottom of the stairs and called, "Sylvie, Sylvie, come down, lass. Osriet, come down." For a time there was no answer. Then a door was unbolted, and Sylvia said, "I can't come down again. I'm noan coming down again tonight." Daniel laughed the more at this, especially when he caught Charlie's look of disappointment. "Hearken how she's bolted her door. She'll noan come near us this night. But she's a stiff little un. She's been our only one, and we'n mostly let her have her own way. But we'll have a pipe and a glass, and that, to my thinking, is as good company as iver a woman in Yorkshire." End of chapter 16.